I never thought a thunderstorm would change my life, but that's exactly what happened on a camping trip in the mountains last September. I'm Reed, 24 years old, and I'd been working at a tech startup in Portland for about 2 years. My friend group from college had planned this annual camping trip, something we'd been doing since graduation, and honestly, I almost didn't go. Work had been intense. I was tired, and the idea of sleeping on the ground for 3 nights didn't exactly thrill me. But my best friend convinced me, said I needed to disconnect and get out of my head for a while. She was right about that, though not for the reasons either of us expected. The group was smaller this year. Only 6 of us made it, down from the usual 10 or 12. That's how I ended up sharing a tent with Asher. We'd met before at various gatherings, knew each other enough to say hello and make small talk, but we'd never really connected. He was a friend of a friend, always sort of on the periphery of our group. Tall, athletic build, dark hair that was constantly falling into his eyes, and this quiet intensity about him that I'd noticed but never really thought about. He was a wilderness guide, which made him the unofficial leader of our little expedition. Everyone deferred to him about where to set up camp, how to properly store food, which trails to take. The first 2 days were pretty standard camping stuff. We hiked during the day, cooked over the fire at night, told stupid stories and laughed too loud under the stars. Asher and I were polite tent mates, coordinating our schedules, making sure we weren't both trying to change at the same time, that sort of thing. He was easy to be around, didn't snore, kept his stuff organized. I caught myself watching him sometimes when he was showing someone how to tie a proper knot or explaining something about the terrain. There was something calming about the way he moved, deliberate and confident, like he belonged out here in a way the rest of us didn't. On the 3rd night, everything changed. The weather had been perfect all day, clear blue skies and warm sunshine. So when the storm rolled in around midnight, it caught us all off guard. I woke up to thunder so loud it felt like it was inside my chest, and rain hammering the tent like it was trying to break through. The wind was intense, making the whole structure shake and bend. I sat up fast, disoriented and honestly a little scared, though I wouldn't have admitted it then. Asher was already awake, sitting up in his sleeping bag, using his phone flashlight to check the tent stakes through the mesh window. "It's okay," he said, his voice steady and calm. "The tent's secure. This is just a mountain storm. They come on fast, but they usually pass quickly." Lightning flashed, so bright it lit up the whole tent for a split second, and the thunder that followed was immediate and deafening. I flinched, and I saw Asher notice. "You all right?" he asked, turning to look at me properly. "Yeah, fine," I said automatically. "Just wasn't expecting it." Another flash, another crack of thunder. I tried not to react this time, but my heart was racing. I'd never liked storms, not since I was a kid. Something about the unpredictability of them, the way you couldn't control or escape them, had always gotten under my skin. I thought I'd outgrown it, but apparently not. "Reed," Asher said quietly. "It's okay to be scared. Storms can be intense, especially out here." "I'm not scared," I lied, then immediately felt stupid about it. We were adults, sharing a tent in the middle of nowhere. What was the point of pretending? He didn't call me out on it, just shifted a little closer. "I used to hate storms when I was younger," he said. "Panic attacks, the whole thing. My dad would sit with me during them. He'd talk about something completely unrelated, just to give my brain something else to focus on. It helped." I looked at him, surprised by the admission. In the dim light from his phone, I could see his face more clearly. There was something open about his expression, something genuine. "What would he talk about?" I asked. "Anything. Baseball statistics, plot holes in movies, why dogs tilt their heads when you talk to them. Didn't matter what it was, just that it was something to think about besides the storm." Another rumble of thunder, farther away this time, but still loud enough to make me tense. Asher started talking about a trail he'd guided last summer, describing the landscape in careful detail, the wildflowers that had been blooming, a family of deer they'd spotted. His voice was soothing, and I found myself actually listening, picturing what he was describing. After a while, I realized my heart rate had slowed down. I was still aware of the storm, but it didn't feel as overwhelming. "Thank you," I said when he paused, "for, distracting me." "Anytime," he said and smiled. It was the first time I'd really seen him smile like that, warm and unguarded, and something shifted in my chest. Not dramatic, not like lightning striking, but more like a door opening that I hadn't known was there. We stayed up talking for the next hour as the storm raged outside. He told me about growing up in Montana, learning to navigate the wilderness from his grandfather. I told him about my job, about how I spent my days staring at screens and sometimes forgot what fresh air felt like. We talked about our families, our friends, the random things that make up a life. And somewhere in that conversation, I became aware of how close we were sitting, how I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, how his hand was resting on his sleeping bag, just inches from mine. The storm was starting to ease when he said, "I should let you get some sleep." But neither of us moved. We just sat there, looking at each other, and I felt something I couldn't quite name. It was like standing on the edge of something high, that moment before you jump where everything feels suspended and possible. "Reed," he said, his voice quieter now. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." He hesitated, and I watched him choose his words carefully. Have you ever thought about—" He stopped, shook his head slightly. "Sorry, never mind. That was weird." "No, what?" I asked, suddenly very aware of my own heartbeat again, but for an entirely different reason than the storm. "It's just, I've noticed you this trip. The way you laugh at things, the way you actually listen when people talk. And I keep thinking I'd like to know you better, but I don't know if that's something you'd even want, or if I'm completely misreading everything." I stared at him, processing what he was saying. Or more accurately, what he wasn't quite saying, but I thought I understood. "I'd like that," I said carefully, "getting to know you better." He smiled again, that same warm smile, but there was something nervous in it now. "Yeah?" "Yeah." The rain had slowed to a steady patter. The thunder was distant now, just a low rumble on the horizon. "I should tell you," Asher said, "that I'm going to be thinking about this conversation all night, and probably overanalyzing every word." I laughed, surprised by his honesty. "Me too, probably. So we're both going to lie here in the dark, overthinking." "Looks like it." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "What if we didn't?" "Didn't what?" "Overthink it." He shifted, and suddenly his hand was next to mine, our fingers almost touching. "What if I told you that I think you're interesting and attractive, and I've been trying to figure out how to talk to you all trip without making it weird?" My breath caught. "I'd say you're doing pretty well so far." "And what if I asked if I could hold your hand, just so we both know this is real, and not something we're going to wake up tomorrow and pretend didn't happen?" I looked down at our hands, so close together. My heart was pounding again, but this was nothing like the fear from the storm. This was anticipation and nervousness, and something that felt like hope. "I'd say yes," I said quietly. His fingers laced through mine, warm and solid and real. I'd held hands with people before, but this felt different, more intentional, more meaningful. We sat there like that, not talking, just holding hands in the darkness while the rain fell outside. "I should probably tell you," I said after a while, that I've never really done this before. With a guy, I mean. Okay, he said simply. No judgment, no pressure, just acknowledgement. I've thought about it. About men. About whether I might be attracted to them. But I never really let myself explore it, you know? It always felt easier to just not think about it. And now I'm sitting in a tent holding hands with a man I barely know, and it feels more right than anything has in a long time, and that's terrifying. His thumb brushed across my knuckles, a small gesture that sent warmth through my whole body. For what it's worth, I think being terrified of something that feels right is pretty normal. I was terrified when I first came out. Terrified of what people would think, of losing friends, of all of it. But the alternative was pretending to be someone I wasn't. And that was worse. When did you know, I asked, that I was gay? I think part of me always knew, but I didn't have words for it until high school. Came out in college. It wasn't always easy, but it was honest. And that mattered more. We talked for another hour, maybe more. I lost track of time. He told me about his first relationship, the mistakes he'd made, the things he'd learned. I told him about my past relationships with women, how they'd always felt slightly off in ways I couldn't articulate, like I was playing a role I'd learned but never fully embodied. He listened without trying to label me or push me toward any conclusions, just accepted what I was saying and shared his own experiences in return. Eventually, exhaustion started to catch up with us. We should probably try to sleep, Asher said. Early hike tomorrow. Yeah, I agreed, but I didn't let go of his hand, and he didn't let go of mine. Reed? Yeah. Would it be okay if I kept holding your hand? While we sleep. Something in my chest expanded, warm and full. I'd like that. We lay down in our separate sleeping bags, arms stretched across the space between us, fingers still intertwined. It should have been uncomfortable, but it wasn't. It felt like an anchor, something solid to hold onto while everything else shifted and rearranged itself in my head. Sweet dreams, he whispered. You too. I didn't fall asleep right away. I lay there in the darkness, listening to his breathing even out, feeling the weight of his hand in mine, and thought about what this meant, about what I was feeling, about the fact that I was 24 years old and maybe just now starting to understand something fundamental about myself. It should have felt like a crisis, but instead it felt like relief, like I'd been holding my breath for years and finally, I could exhale. When I woke up the next morning, we were still holding hands. Early light was filtering through the tent, and I could hear birds starting their morning songs. Asher was already awake, watching me with a soft expression. Morning, he said. Morning. I became suddenly self-conscious, aware of my bedhead and morning breath, and the fact that we were still holding hands in the bright light of day. So, last night happened. It did. He squeezed my hand gently. Any regrets? I thought about it. Really thought about it. No, I said and meant it. You? Not even a little bit. We had to let go eventually, had to get up and face the day and the rest of our friends. Over breakfast, I was hyper-aware of every glance between us, every accidental brush of shoulders, every shared smile. If anyone else noticed, they didn't say anything. We packed up camp, started the hike back to where we'd left the cars. Asher and I ended up walking together, falling into easy conversation about everything and nothing. At one point, when we'd fallen behind the group a bit, he said, "So what happens when we get back to the real world?" What do you mean? I mean, do you want to see where this goes? Or was this just a camping trip thing? I stopped walking, turned to face him. We were on a narrow trail, surrounded by tall pines, and the morning sun was filtering through the branches in shafts of golden light. "I want to see where this goes," I said. "I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm probably going to be awkward and overthink everything, but I want to try." His face broke into that smile again, the one that made my chest feel warm. "I can work with awkward and overthinking." "Yeah." "Yeah." He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, and the gesture was so tender it made my breath catch. "I like you, Reed. I'm willing to be patient while you figure things out." The rest of the hike passed in a blur. Back at the parking lot, as everyone was loading gear and saying goodbyes, Asher pulled me aside. "Can I have your number? Like, actually, have it this time, not just as part of the group chat." I typed it into his phone, watched him save it under my name with a small mountain emoji next to it. "Text me when you get home," he asked. "I will." He hesitated, then pulled me into a hug. It was brief, nothing that would seem unusual to anyone watching, but I felt it everywhere. The solid warmth of him, the way I fit against his chest, the subtle scent of pine and campfire smoke that clung to his clothes. When he pulled back, his hand lingered on my arm for just a second longer than necessary. "See you soon," he said. "See you soon." The drive back to Portland felt surreal. I kept replaying everything in my head, every conversation, every touch, the feeling of falling asleep holding his hand. My friend who'd convinced me to come on the trip was driving, and she kept glancing at me with a knowing look. "So," she finally said, "you and Asher seem to hit it off." "Yeah," I said, trying to sound casual. "He's cool." "Uh-huh. Reed, I've known you for 6 years. You've got that look." "What look?" "The something significant happened and I'm processing it look. Want to talk about it?" I stared out the window at the passing trees. Did I want to talk about it? I wasn't sure I even had words for it yet. "Maybe later," I said. "I'm still figuring it out." She reached over and squeezed my shoulder. "Whenever you're ready. But for what it's worth," I saw the way he looked at you. "That's not nothing." That evening, alone in my apartment, I finally let myself think about everything properly. I sat on my couch with a cup of tea and actually allowed myself to examine what I was feeling. Attraction, definitely. That pull toward him, the way I wanted to be near him, the way my skin felt electric when we touched. But it was more than that. It was the ease of talking to him, the way he made me feel seen and understood, the safety I felt in his presence. Was this what people meant when they talked about connection? About finding someone who just made sense? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Made it home safely. Hope you did too. This is Asher, by the way, in case the mountain emoji wasn't clear." I smiled, saved his contact, typed back. "Home safe. Thanks again for last night. For everything. Thank you for trusting me, and for taking a chance on something new." We texted back and forth for the next hour, easy conversation that flowed as naturally as it had in the tent. Eventually he said, "I know you're probably processing a lot right now. No pressure, but I'd really like to see you again. Maybe dinner this week." My thumb hovered over the keyboard. This was it. The moment where I either moved forward or backed away. I thought about holding his hand in the darkness, about the way he'd listened without judgment, about how right it had felt. "I'd like that," I typed. "Wednesday. Wednesday's perfect. I'll find somewhere good." "Talk tomorrow?" "Talk tomorrow." I set my phone down and sat there in my quiet apartment, feeling something shift and settle inside me. I didn't have all the answers, I didn't know exactly what I was or what this meant for my identity or my future, but I knew that when Asher held my hand, I felt more myself than I had in years. And that seemed like a good place to start. Wednesday couldn't come fast enough. We texted every day, long conversations that ranged from deep and meaningful to silly and random. He sent me photos from his day, scenic overlooks from trails he was guiding, funny signs he passed. I sent him memes that made me think of him, pictures of the terrible coffee at my office, random observations about city life. It felt natural, like we'd been doing this for years instead of days. The night before our dinner, I stood in front of my closet for 20 minutes trying to figure out what to wear. I called my best friend in a panic. I don't know what I'm doing. What do you wear on a first date with a guy? Is it different? Should I dress differently? She laughed. Kind, but not unkind. Read. Breathe. Wear what makes you feel good. What makes you feel like yourself. That's all that matters. I ended up in dark jeans and a button-down shirt. Casual, but put together. When I saw Asher waiting outside the restaurant, he was wearing almost the same thing, and we both laughed when we noticed. Great minds, he said, and pulled me into a hug that lasted just long enough to make my heart race. Dinner was perfect. We sat across from each other in a quiet corner booth, and the conversation flowed like it had in the tent, easy and honest and real. He told me more about his work, the satisfaction of helping people connect with nature, the challenges of running his own guiding business. I told him about my projects at work, my complicated relationship with technology and screens, my dreams of maybe doing something different someday. Like what? He asked, genuinely interested. I don't know exactly. Something that feels more meaningful, I guess. Something where I can see the impact I'm having. You'll figure it out, he said with such confidence that I almost believed him. After dinner, we walked through the city, not really going anywhere, just wandering and talking. Eventually, we ended up at a small park overlooking the river. We sat on a bench, and gradually, naturally, the space between us disappeared. His arm around my shoulders, my head resting against his chest, watching the lights reflect on the water. Can I kiss you? He asked quietly. I lifted my head, looked at him. In the streetlight, his face was soft and open and hopeful. Yes, I said. He kissed me gently, carefully, like I was something precious. It was my first kiss with a man, and it felt like everything clicking into place, like finding a piece of myself I hadn't known was missing. When we pulled apart, I was smiling. Okay? He asked. More than okay. We stayed there for another hour, talking and kissing and just being together. When he finally walked me back to my car, he held my hand the whole way, and I realized that this was what I'd been missing in all my previous relationships. This sense of rightness, of being fully present and fully myself. I really like you, Reed, he said when we reached my car. I really like you too. Can I see you again? Soon. How about this weekend? His smile was bright enough to light up the whole street. It's a date. That was 4 months ago. 4 months of learning and growing and discovering parts of myself I'd kept locked away. 4 months of Asher's patience and understanding, of him never pushing but always being there, solid and steady and sure. 4 months of falling in love, though it took me until last week to actually say the words out loud. We were hiking, because of course we were, back in the mountains where it all started. Just the two of us this time. We'd reached a summit with a view that stretched for miles, and we sat there sharing a thermos of coffee and watching the clouds drift by. I love you, I said, surprising myself with how easily the words came. He turned to look at me, eyes wide. Yeah, I love you. I think I have for a while, but I needed to be sure. And now I am. I love you, Asher. He set down the thermos, took both my hands in his. I love you too. I've been waiting to say it, wanting to give you time. But Reed, I've loved you since that night in the tent, when you trusted me enough to be vulnerable. I kissed him there on that mountain top, and it felt like coming home. Like every step of this journey, every moment of uncertainty and discovery had led me exactly where I was supposed to be. Later, as we hiked back down, I thought about how strange life is. How one thunderstorm, one night of fear, transformed into connection, could change everything. How the person you barely knew could become the person you can't imagine living without. How sometimes finding yourself means letting someone else help you see who you really are. I don't have all the answers still. I'm still figuring out my identity, still learning what it means to be me in all my complexity. But I know that I'm in love with a man who sees me, really sees me, and loves what he finds. I know that holding his hand feels like the most natural thing in the world. And I know that sometimes the scariest moments lead to the most beautiful transformations. That night in the tent, Asher said he'd keep watch, that he'd help me through the storm. What I didn't know then was that he'd keep holding my hand through every storm after that, through every moment of doubt and discovery, through all of it. And I'd do the same for him. That's what love is, I think. Keeping watch for each other, holding hands through the thunder, being brave enough to be vulnerable, and finding someone who makes that vulnerability feel like strength.